I'm starting. You guys already all have your cameras off. Go ahead and mute your mics. Okay, all of you guys are muted. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. And we're just going to go with it, okay? Okay. Thank you for taking the time to join and listen to our debate. Today, we'll be looking at the right to exercise personal liberties versus the need for habilitation. Before we jump into that, however, we're going to introduce the members of our debate, starting with Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Kelly. I have an undergraduate degree in behavioral science. I have 2 years of working in a special education classroom, and I've been in the ABA field for 3 years, specifically focusing with early intervention. And I'm currently in the Ball State University Master's Program for Applied Behavior Analysis with a focus in autism spectrum disorder.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carly Paulus. I have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology with a technical certificate in Behavioral Analysis and Techniques from Purdue. I am 2 years in Applied Behavioral Analysis clinic work, and I have 1 more year on my Master of Arts in Applied Behavioral Analysis here at Ball State.
Hi, I'm Nancy Salinas. I have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of Texas at Rio Grande Valley. I also have 3 years of experience in applied behavior analysis, specifically in the clinical setting with children with autism spectrum disorder. I am currently pursuing my Master of Arts in Applied Behavior Analysis with a concentration in autism spectrum disorder at Ball State University.
Hi, my name is Hunter Zorn. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Healthcare Management from Western Governors University, and I have 2 years of experience in ABA and 2 years in high behavioral disorders. And I'm currently finishing my master's program at Ball State with a focus on autism spectrum disorder, and I should be done in December, hopefully. So during this presentation, the roles will be as follows. I will be introducing the presentation as well as taking the illustrator role for the personal liberty side. Also on the personal liberty side, we have Jackie, who will be summarizing the main points, and Carly and Netzi will take the habilitation side, with Carly acting as the summarizer and Netzi acting as the illustrator. So for this debate, we will be looking at both sides, personal liberties and habilitation. Jackie and myself will be discussing the side of personal liberties, like making one's own choices, whereas Carly and Netzi will be discussing the side of habilitation, which can help people learn the functional skills they will need in life. With these very limited definitions of both personal liberties and habilitation, it is probably clear to see that when providing services, these two sides often end up in competition when in practice with individuals, and we are discussing the differences between these two sides when analysts make decisions in practice. Through this debate, we look to review personal liberties and why letting others make their own choices can lead to positive outcomes, as well as why habilitation or structured interventions is sometimes necessary even when encroaching on the personal liberties of those we serve. To start, we will be looking at how we got to where we are today on the personal liberty side, discussing the rights afforded to all individuals by the Constitution, which will further be exemplified as we continue. And after discussing personal liberties, we will move on to the side of habilitation, which we will discuss the services that provide the individuals with the skills needed to live in society. With a sensitive topic like this, we also felt it imperative to include a discussion about the ethics code for behavior analysts, which guides how we provide services to our clients while remaining ethically sound. Though both sides of this argument will provide evidence that may negate the other, it is important to remember that when providing services like ABA therapy, there are multiple things that must be considered, like the wants and needs of the client and stakeholders, the safety of the client, the safety of others in the environment, and the purpose of this debate is to inform others on why both sides have value, and allow those who listen to inform their own opinions and propagate the conversation afterwards to enrich the level of services being provided under our care. So to get a better picture of where we've come from and where we are in personal liberties, we've come with making personal liberties crucial in planning. It is imperative to look at how we got to today. Let's start by going back nearly 2 centuries to the late 1800s to examine the Constitution. In 1868, the 14th Amendment was ratified, guaranteeing equal protection under the law. Its Due Process Clause became a cornerstone for later civil rights cases, ensuring individuals, including those with disabilities, could challenge unjust treatment by the state. And while this guaranteed all individuals these rights, we are way ahead of ABA even being thought of. To get there, we will move forward looking at some Supreme Court cases, a law, and some documents from the BACB. So, fast forward to 1972 in Wyatt v. Stickney, an Alabama federal court ruled that individuals in state mental health facilities have a constitutional right to adequate treatment. This landmark case established minimum standards for care, emphasizing dignity and humane conditions for those institutionalized. And while this does not necessarily demonstrate or exemplify personal liberties, to get to where we are now, this is the first door that had to be opened to individuals receiving appropriate services. So jump all the way to 1990, and we have the American with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, which was signed into law. This transformative legislation prohibited discrimination based on disability, mandating equal access to employment, services, and public spaces. It empowered individuals with disabilities to live more independently, which leads to our next Supreme Court case. In 1999, the Supreme Court's Olmstead v. LC decision reinforced the ADA. The court ruled that unjustified segregation of people with disabilities violates the ADA, promoting community-based services over institutionalization. This case was a victory for integration and self-determination. A few years later, in 2001, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or the BACB, established its first guidelines for responsible conduct for behavior analysts. These guidelines set ethical standards for practitioners of ABA, emphasizing client welfare and professional integrity in supporting individuals with disabilities. This document has been further updated since, and in December of 2020, the BACB updated its ethical framework with the Ethics Code for Behavior Analysts. This enforceable code strengthened protections for clients, requiring behavior analysts to prioritize clients' rights, cultural responsiveness, and informed consent in their practice. With this information in mind, we will now take a further look at the points justifying the importance of personal liberties when delivering services.
Thank you, Hunter. I want to start off with a direct quote from the Bannerman et al. 1990 article by Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas. He said that, or described personal liberties as the privilege of an individual to plan his own affairs, to shape his own life, and to shape his own life as he thinks best, do what he pleases, go where he pleases, freedom from bodily restraint or compulsion, freedom to walk, stroll, or loaf. The United States Constitution established individuals' personal liberties and made these inalienable rights that are protected by the law. When these rights were not equally applied to individuals with disabilities, the Americans with Disabilities Act was created. This act ensures that individuals with disabilities are guaranteed the same rights as everybody else. Specifically, within the treatment setting, this guarantees individuals with the right to choose activities, to have a say in their treatment plans, to take breaks, and the right to be left alone. According to the Bannerman et al. Article, increased choice in the treatment setting can lead to increased preference, participation, and task completion. Choice in the treatment setting can also lead to decreased occurrence of maladaptive behaviors and lessened effects of aversive stimuli. So to break that down a little bit more, an increase in preference. Specifically, a study conducted by Bayer et al. 1997 found that individuals who engage in stereotypic rocking behaviors would choose to engage in this behavior when they could rock themselves rather than have a researcher rock their chair. Increased participation. When it is a choice to participate or to not participate, research shows that individuals are more likely to choose to participate when they feel they were able to make that choice themselves. Increased task performance or improved task performance. Multiple studies cited in the Bannerman article found that task performance significantly improved across subjects when participants were given a choice in the consequences or reinforcers of their behavior. Specifically within the field of ABA, this might look like letting our clients choose what reinforcer they're working for. As far as decreases in problem behavior when offered choices in treatment, the occurrence of maladaptive behaviors decreases significantly. And effects on aversive stimuli. When individuals are given some autonomy over the aversive stimuli they may be enduring during treatment, for example, duration or magnitude of the stimuli, they're reported to experience less discomfort than if they had no say in the aversive stimuli that they were receiving or experiencing. We frequently hear within the field of ABA from both practitioners and stakeholders that a client prefers a specific toy, item, or activity. For example, a parent might say, oh, he really likes cars. But research by Green et al. From 1988 found that these opinions held by caregivers are often inconsistent with the results of systematic preference assessment. This is one example of how the overreach of habilitation can decrease the effectiveness of an intervention. To promote autonomy and respect the personal liberties of the individuals we serve, systematic assessments are critical in determining preferred reinforcers. To touch on a couple of the ethic codes that Hunter mentioned before, I wanted to talk about Ethics Code 2.09 involving clients and stakeholders. This code states that behavior analysts make appropriate efforts to involve clients and relevant stakeholders throughout the service relationship, including selecting goals, selecting and designing assessment and behavior change interventions, and conducting continual progress monitoring. Within the treatment setting, this is comparable to giving clients or learners a choice, whether it be choosing between multiple different interventions or choosing the reinforcement that they're working for. I also wanted to touch on Ethics Code 2.11, obtaining informed consent, which states behavior analysts are responsible for knowing about and complying with all conditions under which they are required to obtain informed consent from clients, stakeholders, and research participants. Consent and assent can be viewed as a choice or a personal liberty. Clients are given the right to choose to participate or to not participate in treatment. The last ethics code I wanted to touch on was 3.01, or responsibility to clients. This states that behavior analysts act in the best interests of clients, taking appropriate steps to support clients' rights, maximize benefits, and do no harm. As behavior analysts, our goal is to maximize the benefit of any intervention and do no harm to our clients. Including choice and protecting the personal liberties of our clients is critical when establishing rapport and buy-in to interventions. And that is my piece on personal liberties.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for the evidence you provided. We will now be transitioning to the side of habilitation, in which Carly will now tell us about.
Okay. We have come a long way from the previous treatment of individuals with disabilities, in which they were warehoused in asylums under abysmal conditions and subjected to abuse. Giddin and Obi define habilitation as the idea that individuals will be given the skills that they need to live independently or more independently. Habilitation is not to correct or to cure autism, but rather to help improve functional living skills so our clients can live independently. Hugo and Hedgard also discuss the importance of habilitation. People with disabilities are often excluded from or discriminated against by society. We see this in school, healthcare, and the labor market. Individuals with disabilities experience increased socioeconomic hardships, violation of rights, and higher incidences of destructive lifestyles such as smoking or obesity. This is also has a societal cost between approximately 1.2 to 1.6 million US dollars for each individual subsequently included from society. If they do enter the labor market, they are 4 times more likely to be subjected to discrimination. This article also goes on to discuss that those with high functioning autism, or what we would probably call level 1 autism, do not get their needs met to the extent required, which significantly impedes their ability to do well in school. If they do not do well, they are less likely to continue their education. Researchers of this article also discuss how those with autism are often not included in the labor market, and this often stems from a lack of access to proper education and habilitation efforts. When these students were provided the accommodation they needed to be successful, as outlined in the Hugo and Hedgard article, their confidence rose and they were able to be successful. In the Lundvall Quest et al. Study, researchers are interested in client participation and habilitation. Enhanced participation by the client is linked to higher quality of life, higher functioning, and overall well-being. Researchers, um, while the researchers are arguing habilitation is necessary to some extent to improve functioning and quality of life, the client should still be heavily involved in their care, which I think is central to where ABA is heading as a field. We want to teach our clients skills that are relevant to them. In the Bannerman article, researchers discuss how the need for habilitation often requires a therapist to pick goals. They argue the advantages and disadvantages of allowing the client personal liberties in picking their goals. Poor choices could result in poor habilitation. However, moral and legal problems arise when you do not allow your client the right to choice. On the one hand, habilitation efforts offer the client the ability to access skills that will help them to live independently or more independent lives. Wyatt versus Stinicky determined that individuals with intellectual disability have a right to, and I quote, receive such individual habilitation as will give each of them realistic opportunity to lead a more successful and meaningful life and to return to society. Without habilitation, we are not teaching the clients anything. We would not be helping them, and there would not be much point to ABA services without some level of habilitation. Not only has legislation mandated habilitation, but most laws make funding contingent on compliance with specific habilitation standards that emphasize the teaching of independent living skills as well as the provision of a safe and attractive living environment. A strong habilitative view might deny clients the right to choice. This is because they argue those with disabilities may make bad choices. They argue children are treated in a similar fashion as a child is not allowed the same rights of adults. I think that a medium ground can be found here. Individuals with disabilities can be trusted to make decisions about treatment goals that are important to them. However, safety should also be considered. We can encourage our clients to learn skills that will be beneficial to them while still allowing them their autonomy. The right to choice may hinder their acquisition of critical independent living skills. Not only is this not helpful for our clients, but it is also not helpful for the federal or state governments that care for these individuals. And this also applies to our code. So I provided a list of relevant codes. So 2.01 states that we have a right to be providing effective treatment, which can only be done through some habilitation by teaching important skills. 2.13 and 2.14 involve selecting, designing, and implementing assessments and behavior change interventions, respectively. As discussed in the Bannerman article, what goals are we setting? Do we choose for our clients, or do they have a say in their goals? Especially when it comes to daily living skills, our clients might not care too much about certain goals, such as potty training or brushing their teeth. They might not be interested in those, but I think it would ultimately be doing them a disservice not to teach them those skills just because they don't like them, because they are important for health. 2.15, while we also want to be compassionately providing our services, there is still some potential risks that we must consider when implementing an intervention. Finally, we do have a responsibility first and foremost to our clients, and to not teach them important skills because they might not enjoy learning the skill might be doing them an overall disservice. And with that, I will pass it over to Netzi.
Thank you, Carly. So now that we've looked at what habilitation is and why it's prioritized in ethical practice, I want to show you what this actually looks like over a lifetime, both financially and functionally. So on this chart, you'll see a cost comparison with the first bar showing the estimated societal cost of supporting an individual who doesn't receive habilitation, which is about 1.6 million over their lifetime. In contrast, the second bar reflects the average cost of providing habilitative supports between 300,000 and 400,000 per person. These supports include services like therapy, specialized education, and transition planning that help build independence. Then we have our third bar, which is the net cost savings. When habilitation is provided early and effectively, individuals tend to need far fewer long-term supports. That leads to savings of up to 1 million per individual. So habilitation isn't just the ethical thing to do, it's a smart investment that benefits both the person receiving support and the systems funding it. But of course, cost isn't the full picture. The real impact of habilitation is on people's lives. Research has shown that high quality habilitation leads to several meaningful outcomes. First, we have individuals who receive consistent supports are more likely to gain employment and contribute economically. Second, active participation in the habilitation process helps promote independent living, which gives the clients the tools and confidence to manage life on their own terms. Third, when habilitation is individualized and based on what the person actually enjoys or prefers, we often see improvements in social behavior, which leads to more engagement, better cooperation, and fewer behavioral challenges. And finally, with stronger life skills, individuals tend to need fewer long-term services and supports. So ultimately, habilitation isn't just about teaching daily living skills, it's about creating the foundation for long-term autonomy and quality of life.
Thank you, Carly and Nancy, for your wonderful arguments. To continue, we'll move forward into a Q&A portion of the debate where each team will take turns fielding questions from the opposing side. Let's first go to Carly with the question. Carly, with interventions like extinction, which are shown to work but are not always preferred by clients, how do you avoid overreach to avoid being coercive or damaging trust?
I think this is a really good question because extinction is a really difficult topic because it can be so damaging for our clients. Often we see clients with challenging behaviors that stem from escape, which I think are some of the most challenging behaviors to deal with. Extinction would work on these behaviors, for example, but to implement extinction only might be in violation of clients' rights to assent. Our clients should be active participants in their care, and we cannot force them to participate. Our clients should be given the opportunity to learn these skills, but we must remember their rights to be active participants. This means that reinforcement should be high and that we are making therapy fun and engaging for our clients so that they are active participants. We should teach our clients skills to work through these problems, such as asking for a break or all done. We can help by setting the environment up antecedently for success by allowing clients the rights to choice in activities or the schedule of activities. Reinforcement for appropriate behavior should also be on a dense schedule of reinforcement. Our goal is to decrease these behaviors that way, as opposed to purely extinction-based procedures, which might be harmful to the client, coercive, and damaging to trust. So we would never want to just be using only extinction and not allowing our clients the right to access like escape or whatever the function is of that behavior, because that would be a violation of their rights. So for my question, I am going to ask Jackie, what if parents or a school are pushing for an intervention or treatment the client does not want? How do you advocate for the autonomy of your client without alienating your stakeholder? What if you believe the stakeholder to be correct?
Carly, I just want to start off with your answer to that question was absolutely beautiful. For the question that you posed to me, I wanted to highlight Ethics Code 3.12, advocating for appropriate services. So that code highlights that it's the analyst's obligation to advocate for effective and evidence-based interventions. So that would play a role into what the stakeholder is pushing for. the stakeholder or the school is pushing for, and if that is an evidence-based intervention, and the analyst would have to do their research, present their case as to why they think it is or isn't. But at the end of the day, if the client in question is a child or is unable to consent themselves, their legal guardian or stakeholder does have the right to make that decision regarding their intervention. With that being said, I think there is always going to be room for choice within that intervention, even if it is a non-preferred treatment method for the client. For example, if the client is very against, I'll use an example that was used earlier, hand washing, toothbrushing, toilet training, those ADL skills, you can incorporate choice into that programming with providing a choice for the reinforcer that is delivered within the treatment or the intervention. So choosing those high valued reinforcers that they're working for. My question is going to be for Netzi. If a parent requests a rapid behavior change, but this means limiting a client's freedom, how do you decide what's fair to the client?
This kind of situation actually comes up a lot when parents are very eager to see fast progress, especially with challenging behaviors. But from a habilitation perspective, the goal isn't just short-term change. It's building meaningful, lasting skills that actually increase independence. So if the approach being requested limits a client's freedom, we really have to ask, is this helping them grow, or are we just rushing to meet someone else's timeline? What's fair for the client isn't always what's fastest. Teaching communication or regulation might take longer, but it often leads to better long-term outcomes and fewer restrictions in the future. So at the end of the day, what's fair for the client is what actually supports their long-term growth and autonomy, even if it takes more time. So Hunter, my question to you is this. The ethics code stresses client dignity, but what if respecting a choice could lead to harm? Where do you draw the line ethically in that kind of situation?
That was a great question, Nancy, because I think that's something that we all have seen, we all experience on a daily basis, probably. But when a client's choice might cause harm, we've got to weigh the right to decide against the risk. If it's serious, like hurting themselves or others, we might have to step in, especially if they're not thinking clearly or there's a way to help without steamrolling their dignity. It's tricky and it depends on the situation, cultural stuff, and professional rules. But like, let's say we're looking at a situation where it's SIB. These are very serious behaviors. These can cause lots of harm to the individual. And per the ethics code, we're there to protect them and minimize the risk. So yes, we might have to step in, but that doesn't mean we can't provide choices. With SIB, like scratching, or that is because the child is not receiving enough sensory input, we can offer choices for other activities, like going and using a sensory board or playing with some fidget toys. But when it comes to like running in a gym, it may not be the safest behavior, but that's something that those kids are going to have to experience because they're going to argue, and it's not necessarily worth the fight if they say, hey, I want to run, and they trip. So a lot of it is going to come down to a situational thing, and that is why we have to be able to make those decisions and make those judgments in practice. So yes, there are times that we might have to go in and stop a behavior from occurring or intervene. But that does not mean that we take away their choices. It does not mean we take away their rights. They still have the right to act and behave how they want to act. So through this presentation, we talked about both habilitation and personal liberties. Through habilitation, we learned about how these are the skills that are needed to be included in society, the cost it has on society, and the independence it gives to individuals. Whereas on the personal liberties, we discussed the rights from the Bannerman article that caused increases in preference, participation, and performance, and decreases in both problem behavior and the effects of aversive stimuli, as well as the legal framework that set the rules for the least restrictive environment and protecting our rights as individuals. While we have discussed the laws and how far we've come as a society from the right to receive appropriate services to now the right to make choices in those environments, these type of interventions can make therapy more appealing and help remove some of the stigma that resides in ABA. Due to some of the research that was performed in the past, So, while some contingent aversives like shock therapy, which were used in the 1960s, Kogel et al. Had published an article by 1987 that had already proved that research advocating for the use of choice when providing habilitation services was effective. So, while no system is perfect, finding the balance between these services we provide and allowing individuals to make their own choices is what exemplifies ethical ABA services. Moving forward, our conversation should continue to go this way. We should talk about why these services are needed, but how we can let these clients make their own choices. And that is a huge part of independence. Teaching these skills does not necessarily make them independent. Allowing them to make the choices and use the skills we teach is what does. So we need to continue working together and move forward in a positive direction. Thank you guys for listening to our debate. Our last slide is just our references. Feel free to take a look at them. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We would love to communicate with all of you. Thank you.